people are paying attention. One, it is very expensive out there right now, whether you're at the grocery store, the gas station, or you were just literally sitting at your kitchen table trying to figure out how to make it work. But two, these things are front and center. You know, it's not like the issues that are animating people are things that are not being talked about every single day. Like, we can see the effects of the war in Iran at the gas pump. We can feel the effects of the tariffs, whether you're a small business owner or just a consumer. And voters, I know people are like, oh, I don't know. People are paying attention after Labor Days when most voters start clocking in. Paul Mary is going to tell us all about what happened in Memphis just last week. I think the reality is that voters are paying attention. They might not watch the news every day, right? They might not be up on the latest of the nitty gritty of what's happening in politics, but they are very well aware of what decisions elected officials have made and how those decisions are affecting them right now.
Yeah, I mean, Jen, I thought that Wall Street Journal article was so interesting in the way that people can say to the penny how much things are costing them. And the polls, the Reuters poll, the Fox polls, all showing now that people trust the Democrats more than they do the Republicans on the economy. So I guess the question for Democrats is, how do they capitalize on that, right? I mean, how do they make sure this should be such a good season for Democrats, given the amount of dissatisfaction with Republicans? Can they capitalize on that, or are they going to be focused on internal divisions amongst themselves?
No, because the individual candidates will be out there making their campaign argument around the economy. And what I think is encouraging for Democrats, it's not just because there's been a few polls over the last couple of weeks that show Democratic advantage on the economy. And it's not just that they're doing better compared to Republicans. It's that they're just doing better on the economy. It's like the number of who, in terms of do you trust Democrats with the economy, that regardless of Republicans, that number has gone up. So what does that mean? That means that Democrats are connecting on a message about focusing on all the things that they're going to do to lower your costs. And, you know, that's what the individual candidates are going to be the kind of argument that they're going to be making. And also you see even Democrats that are not running, but in positions of power, Democratic governors in particular, very effective at delivering that message. And I think it's, and you can see it's breaking through.
So David Drucker, that's the Democrats' side of this. Let's go to the Republicans. This is a pretty lousy hand to play. I mean, certainly those in the GOP I speak to, deeply concerned about the economy. Those in the West Wing, the political shop there, privately will acknowledge, hey, this is not looking great. And they're scrambling to come up with some sort of message they can use. They seem to be settling on the Red Scare. When you speak to Republicans, how are they thinking about how they can possibly message an economy that is doing so poorly for so many?
Well, they don't really talk about how they're going to message the economy and pull the wool over voters' eyes. I mean, one thing you'll get with Republicans in Congress and running for office around the country, at least privately, is a general acknowledgement that they face a lot of political hurdles. And you're not going to convince voters, as the president appears to try to do on a daily basis, that this is the greatest economy the country's ever seen, when voters just simply don't believe that, to say the least. I do think what Republicans are then going to try and do is focus on Democratic vulnerabilities. And, look, we've seen that. And I wouldn't, necessarily dismiss out of hand that sort of thing can work. I mean, President Joe Biden was facing similar problems heading into the 2022 midterm elections. Inflation was high. There were concerns about public safety and other issues that usually are very motivating for voters that should have cost the president's party at the ballot box. And Democrats didn't lose that many House seats. They lost control of the House because it was a narrow majority, and they gained a Senate seat, right? Independent voters looked at the array of Republican candidates. They looked at the messaging, which was again dominated by President Trump and former President Trump, and they said no thanks. And so I think what Republicans are trying to do, and I've talked to them about this, is sort of recreate those conditions. And they believe that some of the Democrats that are emerging from these primaries in key states, not just blue House districts, but swing states like Michigan and potentially Wisconsin, is you shine a light on what these Democrats stand for, and they hope that that's able to sort of moderate how people feel about Republicans. But just, as the polling shows, if you don't get the job done that they hired you to do, and this is why they voted for President Trump in 2024, very aware of his peccadillos, if you don't get that job done, they're going to look to the other party, and a lot of the scare tactics, which could otherwise be effective, won't be.
So, Jen, you're the host of a new podcast series titled Long Play, Winning the South, in which you travel to southern states to talk with voters ahead of the midterms. You are in Mississippi this morning filming the new episode, but the current episode is up now, which is focused on Tennessee. Tell us what you heard on the ground in that state.
So Tennessee is ground zero for the post-Calais South, right? They are the first state to move. The day after the Calais decision, President Trump calls Governor Lee to do a special session. They go back into session. They are the first state to carve up maps. Within a week, the one remaining Democratic district in Tennessee is carved up into three parts, right? And it's like, it really brings Calais into stark relief, because that congressional district is Memphis, right? The Lorraine Motel, the site of MLK's assassination. You know, it's right there. There are people in Memphis who fought to bring Voting Rights Act into existence, who are now living through its demise. And interestingly, I spoke with a Republican State Representative, Jeremy Fasson, who is retiring. He was the Republican caucus chair in the Tennessee State Legislature. Has been there since 2010. He's a Tea Party guy. He's a very conservative guy. But he said even for him, the party has moved too far to the right on some social issues, on immigration, interestingly. But still, you can watch this clip. He defends carving up that last remaining Democratic district in the state's predominantly black town.
You may want to remove race from voting, but you all took the one predominantly black district in the predominantly black city in Tennessee and broke it up into three pieces, and the chance that a black person can win are very low now.
So I think that's racist, what you just said.
I'm looking at records. I'm looking at how what the outcomes are. You know, that's what I just worry about it.
But what you're saying says nobody can get elected in Memphis if they're black. That's judging them by the color of their skin, Jennifer. That's not looking at the content of who they are or their character.
So what he says is, like, I asked him, say, okay, you take race out of this. Why do you do this? And he's like, well, politics. And at the same time, he's leaving the Tennessee State Legislature because he's so frustrated with how far to the right the Republican Party has gone. And it just feels a little bit like the dead endness of one party rule, which Tennessee, of course, has. And one physical representation of this, I saw there was a Trump superstore I passed on the highway near Newport, Tennessee, and it had a huge one-story high, you can see it in the episode, going out of business sale sign. So it's like, even in Tennessee, even as this power grab happens, there's still a lot of frustration with Trump. And black voter turnout in Shelby County, where Memphis is, last week doubled from 2024.